Hi, everybody.
Hi, everybody.
I'm Chloe,
I'm Courtney, and welcome to 6 Feet Unfiltered.
and today we are going to dive into episode 5, An Open Book. But before we get started, we want to take a second to send our love to anybody who might be listening in Southern California as the crisis with the fires is happening. We're devastated by that.
It's
And
heartbreaking.
yeah, we really don't have any words besides we are devastated to see it, and our hearts are with everybody who is affected by it.
It feels like catastrophe after catastrophe.
Yeah, it's hard to go on social media and turn on your TV and see that and know that there's other human beings and animals that are just having their lives turned upside down, and just it's horrific. And we wanted to, I guess, take a moment to send our love. So we love you, and we're sending you strength.
As much as we possibly can, virtually.
Yes. Okay. So for our episode, we are
Hold on.
okay.
So I have something to bring up.
Oh, is this the surprise?
Yes. You remember 2 episodes ago or 3 when I said, oh, I had an idea, and it was that I wanted to say Winston every time somebody said like.
You remembered why?
I remember where I actually wanted to say Winston.
Okay.
So anytime I feel like there's always a Vanna White, or, like, show us the surveys, somebody, but there's always like something. And I wanted us to have a something whenever we say put up the overlay. So we'll have a Winston in the background. Not really, it's us. But we'll say, Winston, throw up an overlay of,
Oh,
you the lady like we have in this. I love the name Winston, and I wanted it in there. But you'd love that.
I love it. Courtney loves W name.
I do.
Winter, Willa.
But then Violet and Octavia.
Yeah. But you also like the name Winifred, you said.
Yes, I do.
And
So-
Wolfgang.
Yes. We'll throw Winston, will you throw up a pic of my children?
Okay.
Thanks.
Have to get a soundboard to press with, like, you got it.
Next season.
Yes.
Okay.
Okay.
Glad we got that out of the bed.
Yes. I love it. So today we are going to dive into 6 Feet Under Season 1, Episode 5.
I
An
loved this
Open Book.
episode, by the way.
Me too. It was super good and super unique. It did not have... It's funny because the Death Scene character is a porn star, but
Love her.
shockingly, this episode did not really have a whole lot of like sex scenes with the main characters, although there was an overlaying theme of
Yeah.
pornography.
Yep.
I don't know.
Maybe they felt like that was enough.
Yeah, maybe. Like
It checked the box of
Yeah.
enough.
Yes.
Alan Ball, we'll ask you later.
Yes. So this episode opens with a darkly comedic yet tragic death scene that sets the tone for the unique blend of absurdity and emotion that follows. David takes a major step toward honoring his father's legacy by considering the role of deacon at the family church, but the decision brings friction with Keith and a deeper struggle with his own identity. Meanwhile, Ruth and Claire take an unexpected trip to visit family, a well-intentioned attempt at bonding that leads to some eye-opening realizations about their dynamic. Nate, on the other hand, is thrown into the deep end when Brenda introduces him to her unconventional parents and her unpredictable brother, Billy. I love Billy. And at the funeral home, the family navigates the challenges of arranging a service for a porn star whose mourners are as colorful and heartfelt as her career.
I also hate love. I also noticed that the murderer in this scene, of fucking course, was a cat. Dying. As soon as that cat walked in, because remember, I haven't seen this in a long time.
Yeah.
And I kind of start to pick things up as I see it. And I'm like, that motherfucking cat is mentioning those things, and you all know it. And he just sits there licking his paws. Typical. Don't you think? You're a cat lover, right?
I love cats. I have 2 cats.
Winston, can you throw up a pic of Chloe's cats, please?
Meatball and Piglet. They're my little fat babies.
They're
But
actually
yeah,
really
tell us
good.
more about the death scene, Courtney.
She's getting ready for that guy with the big dick that knows how to use it for her date. And she says that she promises that she will introduce, she's going to listen to, what's his name?
The cat?
Yeah.
Tito.
She's going to listen to Tito's advice this time because Tito didn't like the last one.
Mm-hmm.
And he turned out to be a sleaze.
Yeah. And her name was Viveca St. Well, no, her name was actually Jean Louise MacArthur. Better
Her
known.
porno name was Viveca.
Yes, because St. John.
Viveca St. John. I also like that name, Viveca. But I think it's interesting that they don't, like, right off the bat tell us that she's an ex-porn star or current porn star, too. I mean, you could maybe put the pieces together if you wanted to generalize the way that she lived and whatever. But we also think that she's talking to her son. I did when she
Yeah,
first
you don't know who she's talking to.
Yeah.
Then you find out she's talking to her cat, which I don't know.
I think it was purposeful. Tito was over it.
I think Tito did it on purpose.
He did.
What did he do though?
He knocked over the hair curlers, the electric ones,
So she
into the bathtub.
taking
Yeah,
her
'cause she was
bath.
taking a bath before her date. She had to get all prime and proper. And she was relaxing, and he just knocked over the electric hair rollers, and she electrocuted
Yeah.
to death.
Yeah.
Oh, I had a question for Alan Ball. Why? Oh, I think that it's not visible. That's why I didn't put it in there. I was curious because normally when that happens, and I know this is in the early 2000s, but there's like that plug-in that's right by the bathtub and the sink. It has like a stopper on it, so it stops electro current when water hits. So things like that.
I think that
happen.
might be more of a modern thing because I have heard of that too. That's not really a thing anymore, but it used to be a thing.
But our old hair dryers did used to say, "Don't put in the water."
Yeah.
Just in case.
Yes. So
Interesting concept. I don't know.
yeah, Viveca is gone because poor Tito knocks the plugged-in set of electric hair rollers into her bath that she was taking. So that's our opening death scene, and I was sure that you would enjoy that one, Courtney, because of the character, and I knew that you would love Viveca because she's so sex positive. That's really what she was talking to Tito about, was how excited she was to.
I think that it's so liberating to be at a moment in your life where, to be fair, I've never really been a dater. I literally went from relationship to relationship, and now I have 4 kids. And had I dated then, I probably wouldn't have been as so amazing as Viveca. But you better believe if I ever get divorced with Rob and I am 10 years older, I am going to absolutely channel that energy of Viveca because it is so important to not feel gross. There's nothing wrong with having sex. Stranger sex is one of the best things that you can do, which I have had. I'll say nothing more about that. And as long as you're just, keeping it safe. And
she was just a very sex positive character and not ashamed of being excited about liking sex. Yeah. And yeah, I thought it was really interesting how we'll talk more about it as we go through the episode, but how that kind of plays off of David's character and where he's at with his sexuality. But right after the death scene, we see David in church. And they're singing
and David's eyeing up the male singers, and I think he got a little chubby from one of them. And as soon as one of them made eye contact, now I didn't make connection, but was the one that did make eye contact, was he the other head guy, or was he just a random singer?
No, it was just like a young altar boy type character that was singing.
But they were making sexy eyes at each other, and David was like, what did I put? David checking out the male singers, also looking like he took a dump in his pants and is hoping nobody smells it. And then also I noticed right off the bat that the priest was gay.
Yes, Father Jack. I have a lot to say about Father Jack this episode. Is
he on our fuck, marry, kill maybe?
Sure. Yes, for sure. So, okay. We're at, like Courtney just explained, that's the very first glimpse we get to see of David at his church, St. Bartholomew, with Ruth, because remember last episode she asked him to go to church with her. And did you notice how David said that not this church, not St. Bartholomew, but David was saying that the church that he was going to with Keith is in West Hollywood.
What?
Do you think he went to the Pink Pony?
Okay, that is my kid's favorite song right now.
I know. And so I went down a rabbit hole of learning about West Hollywood. I am a northern Minnesota Iron Ranger.
I am as well.
Yes, we've been over this, and I did not know that West Hollywood. I should have put the pieces together, but apparently it
Is
is
the
like
gay
a
scene.
hub for the LGBTQ community, which is it. That's awesome, and it makes a lot of sense that Keith and David were going to a church in West Hollywood
Yep.
because
And
they're more
Keith makes that
accepting. Mhm.
known that we're accepted there or whatever. I can't remember verbatim what he said.
So if you have that context around West Hollywood being like an LGBTQ hub, then that makes more sense. But also in this scene, so Father Jack is the priest and the one who Courtney says is gay. We learn that he's most likely aware that David is gay because that's how we find out that David goes to a church in West Hollywood, because Father Jack goes up to David and is like, "We've missed you." And he's like, "Oh, I've still been going to church." And he's like, "Oh, which one?" And he names it, and he's like, "Oh, is that in the Palisades?" And he's like, "No, it's in West Hollywood." But then there's like, it clicks for Father Jack, and he's like, "Oh, well, I hope that you feel just as accepted here as you do there."
I
So
know. It was actually kind of sweet.
it
but
was so sweet.
yeah.
And that's what so the first time around that I ever watched this show, I remember Father Jack kind of like irked me a little bit. Like
He
I didn't
still
like
kind of
him.
irks me a little bit, and I
There's
can't figure it
something-
out why.
Yeah, it's almost like there's something insincere about his demeanor or something, but maybe I'm wondering if maybe that's just a me thing. And now when I'm seeing him this time around, he's very kind and there's at least so far, he's just been a good, like, there's no red flags yet. So also in this, okay, we already talked about that. We learn that Father Jack probably knows that David is gay.
It is still an advocate for David. Like, he still is like cheering him on, rooting him
Yeah,
on.
and I think you're right. I think it's because Father Jack is gay too.
Oh, so here's where the question then lies. Is Father Jack, let's assume that we're right, that he's really rooting for David because he's gay. Is it because he thinks he's going to bone David? Or because he wants an ally as the gay, as...
I think he
queer
wants
side?
David to know that he supports him.
Okay, that's the third option.
I don't think that I think that he's like full on in his priesthood. I don't think he wants to like bang. But I mean, I could be wrong, but
The first time that I watched it, I think that I was thinking that Father Jack was trying to...
I mean, I think he would if he wasn't a priest.
Yeah. Oh, is he celibate?
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah, I don't know. That's an interesting concept. The tensions behind all of it is what's...
I know
like,
Catholic priests have are they Catholic? I don't
I
even
don't
know.
know.
I don't know. Sorry, we're not sure. But
it's a good topic.
I think that the next thing that I wrote in my notes is answering the question that you just asked. But I think that he's being super kind to David and kind of subliminally, like, read between the lines type deal, telling David that he supports him and accepts him because he's like, "Oh, I hope you feel as comfortable or as welcome here as you did there." But I think he's doing that because he feels a sense of camaraderie with David because they're both gay.
Yes, which is great.
Yeah.
Like, a lot of people, that's what people need to stick together, especially something as ingrained in you as your sexuality, which I am also doing an entire workshop on. FYI, check it out on my website.
Go check it out. What's it called?
How to feel confident about your sexuality.
By Climax with Courtney. Empower Erotica.
Yep. You got it, girl.
And so in this scene, we also learn that Father Jack is going to submit David's name to become a deacon at the church, which is a position that David's father, Nathaniel, previously held. And David is clearly honored and excited about the prospect of following in his father's footsteps by becoming the deacon.
Oh, and then this crazy lady comes up to David afterwards. Is that same scene?
Yeah. Tracy Montrose Blair.
Tracy Montrose Blair.
That's the name of the crazy lady. She's the same one from last episode that came to Paco's funeral.
Yes. I knew I remembered that energy somewhere. So she's freaking out about David.
I have a tattoo of a butterfly.
Yeah, she was coming on strong. She was laying it. It's real thick. And she's like, "Oh, are you married?" And I think he said no.
He was like, "You should know I'm not really available."
Okay.
And then she's like, "Oh, you're married?"
And he says he has a girlfriend.
Mm-hmm.
And she basically says, "Oh, I should have known all the good ones are either taken or gay."
Yeah. So that was Tracy Montrose Blair. She asks him, "Oh, most of the good ones are taken or they're gay." And there was a funny moment in this interaction too, because David was like, when Tracy first went up to him, he was like, "Who are you?" And she was like, "Oh, I'm Tracy Montrose Blair, blah, blah, blah." And he's like, "Oh, nice to meet you. I'm David Fisher." She's like, "I know who you are." And he goes, "Why?" And then she goes over the whole like, "Oh, you're taken, you're gay." Oh, or most of the men are either taken or gay. And then she's like, "I'm certainly glad to find out you aren't gay." And I just felt for David.
It just, that hurts.
It's like
People don't understand that sometimes the words that you say hurt so bad. And I am guilty of that too. I try so hard not to be.
But it's like whenever David turns around, there's another like jab
Thing
at
in his
his
face.
personality or at his identity. It's like, "Oh, you can't be gay, you can't be gay, you can't be gay, you can't be who you are." Like every person that he interacts with is telling him that that's not okay. And they don't realize it, none of them, but that almost makes it worse in a way.
Yeah.
And then he walks back over to Ruth and she's like, "She seems nice." And David goes, "She seems glad to know
Well,
yeah, that was hilarious. David's funny. Okay, so that
and hold on, does Ruth like really think that that is who David would date if he was
I
straight?
think Ruth is just desperate for David
to get something.
She wants like grandchildren and she wants him to like get married and have kids.
Ruth needs to calm down first before she has grandchildren. She's
Yeah.
irritated at this moment.
Yep. So next scene is Nate goes to visit Brenda at her parents' uber upscale home. And
why don't we have friends like this?
Seriously, their house is so nice.
Fuck that. Like we grew up with, we blew up our pools with our own mouths and threw hose water in them and let them sit out and get warm.
We had the crazy days.
Or if we were really feeling it, we would put the fucking sprinkler under the trampoline and go haywire.
That was like peak. Like,
yes,
fun times.
It was. And it's like, I remember watching stuff on TV. If you're watching us and you have a house like Brenda's parents, can you just send us a pic?
Yeah, we want to see it. I love interior design and home design too. So I always love looking at all of the different characters. Well, in this case, yeah. The things that the character or the way that the characters have their homes designed, because this show specifically, it's set in LA. So most of their homes are they're just
elegant.
Yeah. Well, they all have a unique vibe and style. And the Chenoweth's home is very modern. It's very sterile, but they have this lovely heated pool. So Nate and Brenda take a dip in the heated pool, and
it's like more heated than like I'm thinking bath water.
Yeah, because Nate makes a comment like, "What, aren't you cold? It's chilly." And she was like, "Oh, they keep it heated all year round, so it must be pretty warm."
Yeah. Anyways, I don't know. I'm manifesting this pool.
We will have a house like the Chenoweth someday, except for mine will not look like that. I'm a cottage core girly.
I don't even care. It can look like that.
It is a very nice home. It just is like kind of cool
feeling.
Okay. It's sterile.
Well, then if you jump in the pool, you'll get warm.
Yeah.
Okay. Oh, sterile. I don't like sterile. So then Nate tells Brenda that she scares him a little. And I love that because the look on Brenda's face it seemed as though you could feel the fact that she won. You know what I mean? Like that's what she wanted to get. Yes. Mm-hmm. And I noticed that comment because I have personally heard that from a lot of men in my life. And I think it's a compliment. You should be scared of me.
I don't think it's bad at all. I think, yeah, I wouldn't be offended if somebody said that. Kind of
compliment.
Yeah. It's like connected to how we were talking about last time, how women are always expected to be like a certain thing, a certain way. Yep. And she's not. So that in and of itself is scary to him, which is, I mean, if he has a problem with it, that's a him problem. It's not her problem. And she doesn't care. So then we also meet Margaret and Bernard Chenoweth in this scene, which are Brenda's parents. And they walk in on Brenda and Nate making out in the pool. And they're clearly trying to analyze him. And Nate is clearly uncomfortable.
Because they are therapists. I think both of them are, right?
Oh, yeah. Yeah. And we learn more about that. But that is like also kind of where Brenda gets her shtick of constantly analyzing Nate.
Mm-hmm. And Nate's waiting in the pool, like a fool, probably waiting for his boner to go down.
Yeah, they get home and Brenda just kind of gets out of the pool and walks away after introducing them or whatever, and Nate stays in the pool. You're probably right. I didn't
Totally.
even really like think about it that much, but now that I'm thinking about it, I'm like, why else would he just stay in the pool after she got? So we're at this school with Claire and Ruth with Gary, the counselor, and he had,
Who's also 13.
I think he looks 13 years.
He's so young. He graduated last
Oh
year.
yeah, I mean, yeah, he definitely is. He's probably like early 20s. So
Just graduated, I bet.
yeah, so kind of, yeah, we had teachers like that.
Yes, we did. Yeah. Some of them you liked, some of them you didn't. It was funny too, though, or not really funny, but they're bickering back and forth. And Claire mentioned something about being unhappy or like growing up sad or whatever. And Ruth's like defense mode. She says, you are a very happy young girl and you know it. And it bothers me that Ruth is basically telling Claire what her own feelings were. You had a roof over your head and food on the table. And I'm like, that's enough. Like, that is actually okay. Yes, that's great. Those are called necessities.
Mm-hmm.
That's like the bare minimum.
Yeah. But we also kind of learn in her freak out here that Ruth had a really shitty like upbringing. So not
Which makes sense then.
right. It makes it make sense. It doesn't make it okay, but it makes it make
You
sense
never want
as
to
to
invalidate
why.
somebody's feelings.
Right. But I can see why Ruth is like, she would not have ever even come to the realization on her own that Claire was feeling that way, because when she compares when Ruth compares Claire's experience and upbringing to her own, it's exponentially better, because she talks about having to take care of her grandmother who had both her legs amputated and they lived above like a hair salon or something like that. I don't even know if that's right.
As a parent too, you want, if you can just do a little bit better.
Right. And
than what you
comparatively,
did.
she did.
Yes. So in her mind, I think it bothered me. That didn't correlate in my brain quite.
I do agree with you 100% though that Claire is still valid in feeling sad about their
Something.
situation.
Whatever. Like,
yeah.
You're allowed to feel shitty about your life. You can feel shitty about your life and grateful at the same time. Like, two emotions can coexist.
And you can recognize that your situation is not as bad as some other situations, but still
it doesn't
have
devalue
about
the
it.
way.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
You're still allowed to feel a type of way. So I actually really empathize with Claire here in this scene while she's having this counseling session with her mom and the school counselor. I feel kind of like similar with my own family dynamics, because I talked about in previous episodes a little bit how much older my siblings are than me. But I kind of relate to Claire in this way because I kind of went through, I don't know, like a similar thing. My parents got divorced when I was like 1, but then I got to grow up and I got to see pictures of like people being all together and happy, but I never got to experience
you don't
that.
remember it.
Yeah. And it's like, that is a shitty feeling. It's like, okay, so I joined the party and you all just like fucked everything up. Like, thanks. I don't know. So,
dude, that's insane.
Yeah. I really, really, I think as I'm watching through this time again, it's making even more sense to me now why I love Claire so much. But I just really do empathize with her. And yeah, like feeling like you missed out on the good times.
Yep.
And I do also feel for Ruth, though, because it's not her fault that things panned out the way they did. It's not her fault that Nathaniel died and that she's grieving.
And they clearly were not happy for a long time because Ruth was having an affair too. So there was, I'll bet you that this happiness, the exempt of the happiness, has been happening for a while.
Right. Yeah. And it's just all kind of like coming to light now because Nathaniel died and they're all just like navigating that. Mm-hmm. But I also loved how Gary, the counselor, dips out on them. He goes,
"It doesn't have to be over."
Yeah. He was like, "I just think you guys should like make time for more dialogue." Okay, great session. And Ruth is like, "Well, that's it. It's over." And he's like, "Well, like I said, that's up to you." But, and then Claire,
I think he did well, though.
I thought it was a really good tactic to use. And then Claire says, she like looks at Ruth and she's like, "He does this for like 5 schools." And that made me laugh because having been a teacher, I know that is so real and that is so like he probably did do that for 5 schools and just literally, I mean, resources are just so scarce. It's interesting to see even in 2001 that it was like kind of the same vibe. It's worse now. However, they are in a high school, which is
Did he take notes?
on their session.
Yeah.
Probably, but I mean, he probably has a caseload of like 100 different kids. I don't know, like amongst different schools. So imagine that though, like that's kind of crazy. And that's our education system, and it has not gotten any better. It has gotten exponentially worse than that depiction there, I can tell you. Obviously, all schools are a little bit different depending on how they're funded.
And that's a whole nother topic of discussion. That's a new podcast. Okay, so then we go to they get Viveca in the morgue, and I thoroughly was LOLing at the moment that Rico is like, okay.
So Viveca has huge boobs, huge boobs. She was a porn star. I mean, but that's kind of like her most pronounced feature.
Yeah, that was probably her favorite feature of herself. And who was it? Was it
Nate? I think it was Nate.
So Rico's like explaining to Nate, and he's like, "Get this, something about her boobs being cockeyed, and one was like looking up, and one was looking down." And I was like, "Bro, okay, I've nursed all 4 of my kids. That is literally what my boobs do. They're hard and voluptuous, but I can wrap one boob around the carrier and feed a baby with it. So like, I get the cockeye without dying."
It's like, what? And they said absolutely no bra. So he's like, I don't know what I'm going to do. But they were like,
but rigor mortis probably sent in. And even a bra wouldn't fix that. You know what I mean? It's all stiff and...
So we find out later what Rico, he pulls another trick.
Oh, yes, you're right. I won't ruin that. But this whole scene was just killing me because of the cockeyed boobs. And then David walks in. Okay, so now we have David, Rico, and Nate all in the room. And Nate's like... Right before this, David was talking to somebody about Viveca, and they're like, "Oh, you know her work?" And he's like, "Yes, I'm a big fan of her work."
He was doing like the intake for her.
Yes. And then he walks down to Nate and Rico talking about the cockeyed boobs and them putting 2 and 2 together, figuring out she's a porn star. Obviously, David didn't watch female porn. And then walks in, they're talking about her and how she fucked a snake, which I want to see that video.
I know.
Winston?
What does that even mean?
Hey, Winston? Can you pull it? I'm just kidding. It could be like so many things. And then David being upset with the way that they're talking, the vulgarity around the deceased body, which I also think is really important. Like, you want to have that respect, that level of respect. I don't think Viveca would have cared.
Yeah.
But she's also not allowed. She isn't give consent in the conversation.
Yeah.
So I can totally see that. I love that David was upset about that and holds that standard, because I think that that's important in his morals. God, he's so fucking weird. He probably conflicts his morals in his head all the time. Like, he knows or he thinks he knows what's like right and wrong. And
I feel like this episode was also very focused on David, just like last episode was.
Yeah.
But we see that a lot with him, where he is going through a very big, like, realization kind of about like
evolution.
Evolution's a good word for it. He's reconciling a lot of different conflicting ideas, I think.
About his own identity. It's wild.
Yeah. In that scene, we found out a little bit more about our Destiny character, Viveca St. We know so far that she was a porno star, and David has no idea about that because he obviously would have never been interested in heterocentric pornography. But Nate and Rico clearly know who she is. David's face when he finds out that she was a porn star was hilarious. He literally he was just like, what?
Yeah.
Yeah, Ruth freaks out later on. But we also see some growth in Nate's character within that interaction that you just kind of described, because David gets upset that Nate and Rico are kind of being disrespectful toward Viveca, and he pulls Nate aside and he's like, "Damn it, Nate, the woman on that table is just as deserving of dignity as anybody else that we prepare." And this is actually a really sweet and memorable line for David's character, because we really see him benefiting from confronting the humanity of the people that they're burying, regardless of what walk of life they come from. Like last episode, we saw that with Paco and the gang. Now we're seeing it with Viveca being a porn star. And Nate does agree and apologizes to David, and David says, thank you. And that really felt like a genuine growth moment for their relationship there.
Being humble is huge in a relationship. Being able to acknowledge that you fucked up or...
Yeah, for sure. And that made me respect Nate too.
Yes. I think that's one of my favorite qualities in human beings is just being able to own.
It is wild to me how many people are incapable of
doing that,
being humble.
Yeah. I'm married to one.
It is absolutely crazy to me, the amount of I can't, because I feel, we've talked about this before, but I feel like when I make a mistake, or whether it's in a personal relationship or a work setting or something, I feel like I will look like an idiot if I do not own up to my mistakes.
Yeah.
Because it's obvious. Why I can't comprehend why somebody would want to dig their feet in on stand when you know that you're in the wrong. It's crazy to me. But there's so many people who are incapable of that.
Oh my God, so many. One of my favorite things that I say, or that I believe, and I actually tell my girls this too, is when you ever come across a moment in life where you are either pointed out that you did something wrong or corrected, it's actually a huge compliment, because if you're not growing in your life, then you're just like stagnant and boring, and it's not fun. When you get pointed out something like that, like Nate just had an opportunity to grow as a human being and realize that his words matter.
Had an impact.
Yeah. And I think that's huge. So if you can't just, that situation could have gone differently.
Yeah, for sure. Respect to Nate there. That's what I would always tell my first graders too. Mistakes make you smarter.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So then next we meet Margaret we already met Margaret and Bernard in the pool, but Margaret and Bernard call Nate.
Bernard called Nate.
And they insist that he joins them for dinner that evening, and then they just hang up on it.
They won't take no for an answer.
Yeah. And then Ruth walks into Claire's room while she's playing violent video games, and she's like, suck on that, you ugly fuck, which was hilarious because that's just her in her element, and I loved seeing it.
She was unwinding.
Yeah. She was just having fun playing her games. And Ruth asks Claire to watch movies with her the next night or something. And my heart just really hurts for Ruth in this scene because she's trying so hard to build a relationship with Claire, and Claire is feeling like suffocated, not really interested. I do feel for both of them because Ruth can be super annoying and overbearing, and like, why would you want to hang out with somebody who makes you feel annoyed?
Mm-hmm.
But at the same time, it's your mom and she's sad and she wants to hang out with you. But like, I don't know. I get both sides, but I feel for both of them.
Same. That's a toughie.
For sure. And definitely been there too. I think we probably both have, but
definitely. And I know I'm going to be there again with my kids.
Yeah.
Too.
Yeah.
And if I'm not Ruth,
Right. It's that
I think a lot of moms can relate to that. You don't have to be. Ruth is definitely a more exaggerated version, but when you hit those teenage years, we all know what happens.
That dynamic can manifest.
You can no longer drop your kids off in your robe at school.
Yeah.
They'll probably get mad at you.
Yeah, for sure. I just started flashing back to being like when I started being embarrassed of my mom. It was like 6th grade. I feel. Yeah.
Fucking puberty.
So David tells Keith about being recommended for the deaconship as church, which is a little bit of a contentious conversation between those two because David has been going to church with Keith in West Hollywood, but now he'll have to go to his church all the time.
And Keith asks David if they know that he's gay. And David says, I think Father Jack has a pretty good idea.
Yeah.
And I thought that was funny.
For all the reasons we already kind of talked about.
Yeah.
West Hollywood Church, Father Jack is most likely also gay. But I was really surprised here in the scene that Keith says that he thinks it's great and he supports David. But Keith also kind of uses this as a tactic to rope David into going to a party with him to meet his friends that weekend. Not rope him in, but to kind of say, okay, I'm going to be supportive of this so that you will have to agree to do this with me. And basically explains, I want you to meet my friends. And David says,
Then he'll do it.
I'd like that, which makes Keith really happy. And then there's kind of a very light, sexy moment here. He was like, ooh, forgive me, Father, for I am about to sin. And then they start making out. And I love Keith's cheesy
one-liner.
Yeah. It's so funny.
They come out so naturally from his mouth, too.
They're not even cheesy when he says it. It's just funny and cute.
Okay, so then I'm talking about the tizzy between Ruth and Claire after turning off their Nutty Professor blockbuster.
So Ruth and Claire are watching a film, and Ruth doesn't like the farting noises on the show that they're watching, Nutty Professor, I'm assuming. So she turns it off, and she's just like... She turns to Claire and
Claire's laughing her ass off.
Yeah,
the farting noises.
She thinks it's stupid too, but she's laughing because her mom is like so uncomfortable. And then Ruth says, I know you think I'm old and stupid, but I love you and I'm worried about you and I don't know how to help. And then Claire proceeds to spill the tea on why she stole the foot, because that's kind of what Ruth was referencing. And she goes, it wasn't premeditated. I'm not Jeffrey Dahmer. And she also has a line here when she goes, why does everybody think I'm like part of the trenchcoat mafia or something? And I didn't find this out until after I finished watching the episode and I looked up stuff about the episode. But I didn't make this connection until I read this. But she was referencing the Columbine high school massacre because Dylan Klebold and Eric, I forgot his last name.
What was the Columbine massacre?
1999. And this was in 2001. So this was right around that time, like 2 years after Columbine took place. And the two murderers, the two boys who murdered everybody in the Columbine high school shooting in 1999 that was like their, I don't know if they made it up or if it was a thing that people just said. I don't know the details, but they were like in the trenchcoat mafia. So Claire was saying, why does everybody think I'm part of the trenchcoat mafia?
Oh,
I know. I thought that was so interesting too. And I especially, the Columbine massacre is like
scares the fuck out.
It is.
We had people come to our school.
Yeah. The Rachel's story. I have learned so much.
Was she the bigger one?
No, but I know who you're talking about. Oh my gosh. This is a whole freaking tangent. I have done so much deep diving and watched so many documentaries.
That's on my list.
On Columbine. It is so fucked up to me. It's just a rabbit hole that I've gone down.
And it happened at a very interesting moment in our lives. We obviously, you said that was 1999.
Yeah. So we were in like kindergarten or first grade.
People that
April
they started
20th.
Talking about the fear started to throw in our face then. Like ever since with
guns and stuff at school.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
I have had a fear of that.
Yeah. Well, for sure. And that's still, I mean, don't even get me started
today,
talking
clearly,
about gun control.
I just know that I can correlate my fears back to that.
Yeah.
If that makes sense.
Yeah.
Anyways, continue.
That was like, I just thought that was...
You've gone down the rabbit hole.
It was just really interesting to realize that she was referencing that being a separate special interest of mine, I guess.
Wow.
But... it was ultimately kind of a funny moment here for Claire because she was like, why does everybody think I'm part of the trenchcoat mafia? I'm not fucking Jeffrey Dahmer. Like, it wasn't premeditated. Yeah. Dark, but super funny.
Mm-hmm.
So that made me laugh. But it was really brave and vulnerable for Claire. She explained why she stole the foot. So she, in her explanation, told Ruth that she had sex with Gabe and that he outed her for sucking his toe. And Ruth was just like befuddled. But
Ruth had a lot to unpack right there.
Yeah.
Let's be real.
All she could say to that whole spiel that Claire just gave was, you're having sex?
Uh-huh.
And then Claire just freaks out and was like, no, you know what? Like, I cannot do this with you. But I also felt for Ruth there too, because I don't think that she was mad or wanted to punish Claire. I think she was just shocked and realized after it came out of her mouth that maybe wasn't the best thing to say in that moment because it drove Claire away. But it was just her biggest concern as her
But
mother.
who knows what the best thing to do in that situation? I can think of a couple things that would have been wrong or like not the right thing to do. And Ruth, in my opinion, didn't do those. And I think that's also really cool. It was just that scenario is so.
I think like Claire did tell Ruth that she was having sex, but she also told her a whole bunch of other things in that whole story.
In like 3 sentences.
So I can see though why she got upset and stormed off if Ruth was only able to fixate on that one aspect, which was like not the most traumatic part for Claire. It was like Claire was saying, like, sharing her trauma with her mom, and then her mom
Fixated on
something that she did wrong or was like calling her out for something that, like,
you know what? I've been guilty of that. Not recently, but I can remember hearing a story from somebody and fixating on the one thing that like triggered me.
Yeah.
But really, what you need to do is take those triggers, take a deep breath, unpack the.
Do you remember an example? Are you thinking of like your kids or like
No, it was. I can't even think of an example. I just know that I am guilty of doing things like
that. Well, we probably all are.
Yeah. So it's a good reminder to just think before you speak.
Yeah.
Which is so hard to do sometimes, but I think it's really beneficial. In fact, I made this rule now. This might help some of you. Whenever I get an email or I have to make a decision or so, like some shit like that just happened, I don't respond for 24 hours.
I think we talked about this in one of our last episodes.
Really?
Yeah.
Well, here's your second reminder.
That's a really good strategy, though, because I have definitely talked myself off of multiple ledges by doing that.
Or you type out what you want to fucking say.
Oh, yeah. I do that so much.
And then wait,
it's crazy how that works. How
good you feel afterwards.
Yes. You have to be careful, though, to not. Because sometimes if you go to type something out to yourself or to write yourself a note to let it all out, sometimes what you let out actually does need to be shared with other people.
Yes.
But I've done that before where I've written it down and then kind of let myself put it away without
going back and pulling the pieces that really do need to be aired.
Yeah. And that
so it's
come back to bite me.
To come back to it then in 24 hours.
Yeah.
And maybe just take some of the anger out of the emotion, the raw emotion out of it. Or maybe you leave the raw emotion. Who the fuck knows? I mean, there's been times that we probably hit send.
Yeah, for sure.
I also heard another quote a few years ago. I probably brought this up already, but I'll bring it up again. If you can't look back at the last 5 years of your life and cringe at something that you've said or done, then you are not growing as a human. So whenever I do something that I want to cringe at 5 minutes ago, I think, oh, this is even better. This will be even better in 5 years. So, take it for what you can. Nate shows up at Brenda's parents without knowing Brenda wouldn't be there. And Brenda's mom sort of hits on him, which I thought was odd.
Yeah, tell me about that. When did you think she was hitting on him? Because I didn't pick that up.
Really?
I thought they were just being like analyzing him.
No, she was flirting. She said it was about the whiskey or his choice of beverage. And she's like,
manly, but not elitist. You're just her type.
Yeah. And Bernard said, calm yourself or something. I don't know. It was really weird. And so I'm like, oh my God, are they going to sneak him off to the back bedroom and have their way with him? That's the kind of vibe I got.
Okay. Yeah, that's probably the kind of vibe he was getting. He didn't know what to think.
And so then I wrote, is this the beginning of a porno? Is that the theme of this episode?
Nate's not happy about Brenda not being there. He's like, I kind of wish somebody would have thought to tell me about this. And they were like, we thought that Brenda did, basically, which I think is true. But Nate doesn't appreciate being jerked around like that.
Yeah. I don't think any of us would have appreciated it. I think we made the best out of the situation, kind of like Nate did.
Yeah. Not a fun situation to be in.
No. Then we're back down at the church again, and this motherfucker is asking David all of these questions about being the deacon with what's his name? The father?
I don't know what the old guy's name was. I didn't like him. He was an old fart.
Yes, he was gross. And I just really felt like there was a don't ask, don't tell situation here of him asking David, is there anything else you want to tell me? And David's like, is there anything else that you want to ask or want to ask me or know about me?
Yeah.
And it was just like, come on.
It was a really uncomfortable scene. So David is interviewing for his like deaconship with Father Jack and the head guy of the church. We don't know what his title is, but this guy is like side-eyeing David, like he's suspicious of him almost. And he asks, "Are you married?" Why would he ask that?
But I was engaged once.
Yeah.
Which I thought was interesting. You're right. Why would he ask that if he didn't?
If it wasn't to insinuate that he's suspicious of his sexual orientation.
And why would David ever say I was engaged once?
To make him think that he's straight.
Yes.
Yeah. So
because I would never say that.
Yeah. If you had come to terms
if I was
with
trying
your
to hide
own
something.
identity.
Yes.
Yeah. And so we're seeing that David is still he's at a crossroads here with choosing to stand for who he is or to submit to this version of himself that this church, St. Bartholomew's, wants him to be or needs him to be in order to be in this deaconship. And yeah, like you said, this guy asks him, "Is there anything else you would like to tell me about yourself before I consider this?" And David is like, "Is there anything specific about me that you'd like to ask?" And also the dude tells David that there's more to the position of being a deacon than just passing out your business cards after mass, which was kind of rude. So F him.
I loved his response though. It was very diplomatic.
Yeah, David was just like, "Oh, I would consider that a grave sin." And Father Jack goes, "No pun intended." Saying David looks at him like, yeah.
I'm also that line also kills me because we think that we're supposed to think that he meant grave as in
horrible,
and that the dead people go to the graves.
Yeah.
Right? Grave and grave. Mm-hmm. But really, the pun, I think, was that they're both gay. And like they're already like sinning. You know what I mean?
That's so true. I think you're right. That's really fun. There is such clever little innuendos in this show. It's really funny. And I also love this was another like pro Father Jack moment because right after this fuddy-duddy old man walks out after telling David all this mean shit, Father Jack goes up to David and he's like, "Oh, by the way, I just wanted to let you know that I gave your name to so-and-so who was acting about funeral arrangements. You should be expecting a call." So he's showing David like, fuck him, I got you. Just play the game and you're in. And it's like, I don't know. I feel bad because it's like, David really wants this. I want it for him because he wants it. And clearly he has an ally in Father Jack, but it's still the whole situation in itself is like not really good for David. I mean, it's showing, I guess it's giving him a challenge that he has to decide how he's going to navigate. Really quickly, then we see Ruth barge into Claire's room to tell her that they're going to spend the night at Ruth's cousin Hannah's in another attempt to force bonding with Claire.
I think then we're back at the dinner with Nate and Bernard and Margaret. And Margaret's telling Nate that Brenda is a master manipulator. And I'm just thinking this whole situation is weird. Nate also asking about the name of Nathaniel rubs me wrong. That's sort of an invasion of privacy. I feel like if Nate, he seemed like an opportunist at this point.
Yeah.
Of like, okay, well, I guess I'm here. I might as well make the best of it. Instead of just having fun, he's like trying to find out more about Brenda, which it drives me nuts when other people are like outing other people's business like that.
Yeah. I get that for sure. But I think
I understand the curiosity.
Yeah.
But curiosity killed the motherfucking cat.
Yeah. I think Brenda knew though that I think too.
Which we find out I wrote this before we got to the end of the episode.
Yeah. And I think that even if Nate didn't ask, Margaret and Bernard would have somehow.
They were hoping that he was going to ask.
Yeah. They would have found a way to, maybe if they didn't come out and tell him all of it, they would have told him some stuff. They want to like control her.
Yep. They get off on, do you need more? They get off on outing their daughter. Like, what the fuck is wrong with you?
Right. Because we find out all this shit about her. So clearly they've had this like power struggle throughout her whole life. But yeah, Margaret and Bernard proceed to tell Nate that Brenda has an IQ of 180.
Which
she's
I don't even know what that means.
It's really high.
Winston, what's the
I think the average IQ is like 100.
Okay.
And if you're like 70 or below, you're considered like a little bit
Special.
slow. I don't know. That's just what's in my head, but I'm not sure. So 180 is like crazy high. And we also find out about the backstory with Brenda's Nathaniel tattoo. It's a nod to a dark British children's series called Nathaniel and Isabel, which apparently Brenda read to Billy when they were kids, when Brenda was like 4 or 5, because apparently she learned how to read by the time she was 3. And Margaret's like, yeah, it's all in the book. And Nate was like, what book? And Margaret was like, you mean she didn't tell you about that either?
They fucking know that she didn't. And this, I'm just so irritated because they know their daughter. Okay, if they're asking that question, then they are not very good therapists. They don't really understand their daughter. There's a lot of things wrong with that. Like, they fucking knew that Brenda, I think that they knew Brenda wouldn't have told me she's not coming.
Yeah. Yeah. They were acting like, oh my gosh, she didn't tell you about this, but I think you're right.
Playing like victim-y stuff there. I don't know. It's just, ugh.
It was really
Don't
weird.
fuck with my Brenda.
Yeah.
Margaret, Bernard.
Yeah, they're not very good parents. It was very weird, but
they have a cool pool.
They do. They do. And then we're back at the sleepover situation with Ruth.
I'm just all sorts of irritated mad about this episode, but I think that's why I liked it, because it was just like fueling me of all of the things that trigger me.
There was a lot of that.
I should probably see my therapist about that too. But the cousins, who I actually do like, I really do like these two people. I think that they're so blinded and naive with their small problems but I think they mean well.
Yeah.
I really do. I don't see malice coming from them.
I see ignorance.
Yeah. It was a lot of ignorance and naivety. Anyway, so this part triggers me. I had an eating disorder growing up. I was bulimic for a few years, and it would go back and forth through college. I've been clean for probably 10 years, at least for as long as I've been a mom. But anyways, the daughter or the mom was talking about how we would never allow ourselves this kind of food unless it was a special occasion.
Well, they were eating like KFC.
Yeah.
Whatever.
Friend that worked at KFC in Hibbing.
Who?
Laren Squagler.
Okay.
I made that up, but it rhymes with their real name.
Okay.
And he was telling me a story about when he was working at KFC and somebody, flip and flap, I know his name, I can't remember it, but he dropped a thing on the floor and just like scooped it up and put it.
Oh my God.
At the door, so KFC's kind of freaky. Anyways, and so they're like, we're definitely going to have to go to an extra spin class this week. And I'm like, gross. I personally hate diet culture. It is a huge trigger for me. I think that it is very toxic. And that was like,
yeah, they gave me very toxic vibes. Like, I agree with you, I guess, that they probably meant well and they're just ignorant. But there were a lot of things about this little visit with them that were very toxic and just icky. Claire and Ruth are with Hannah and her daughter, Jenny. So must be Claire's cousin then, or second cousin. And it's really awkward because Hannah and Jenny are very peppy and Claire and Ruth are very sullen. They're not really getting along, obviously, as we know. And clearly these ladies are not Claire's vibe. And both Ruth and Claire kind of start giving each other looks like, what the fuck is wrong with these people? Which is funny.
I also think that I can see me and my daughters like Hannah and Jenny.
Okay.
Super close and like whatever in a different setting. Right.
Yeah.
Like, we're not going to talk about the food. We have to do an extra spin class.
Well, I don't think it's icky that they're close or anything. I think it's they kind of were like giving the vibe of like kind of like why I don't like Nate that much. It's like everything's good, everything's fine. There's only good, happy things happening all the time, and everything's rainbows and butterflies. And Claire and Ruth are like still navigating this trauma of Nathaniel's death, and they're like not in the mood to be vibing with people who are like, it's all rainbows and butterflies, because that's not how they're feeling. And I don't know, I don't think Claire ever did feel or ever will in the future feel that way. That's just not her vibe.
Right. That all in itself is different.
They just weren't, they're not on the same.
Their priorities were just not where, here, I'll put it this way. If I would have met them at gymnastics with my girls, I probably wouldn't hang out with the mom. You know what I mean? Like, I'm always looking for the mom friends that I can hang out with that swear and
Yeah.
like to
They like
talk
weren't
about-
safe.
No. I would not let my guards down. I wouldn't fart in front of them. Actually, I would fart in front of them.
Right. But that's the vibe they gave.
Yes, that you can't fart in front of them.
Yeah. And we'll
I
go.
think my contact just flipped over.
We'll talk more about them. But then Nate arrives at Brenda's house after the dinner with her parents and confronts Brenda and is like, why didn't you tell me about any of this? And Nate says to her, what I can't handle is how you keep mind fucking me for your own personal entertainment.
Which is so fun to mind fuck a dude.
And yeah, Brenda does love doing that. But she's like, this was a really good line from her. She always comes through with the best lines. But she says, well, I'm sorry if I'm not a well-behaved little nothing that never challenges you. But if that's what you're looking for, you might as well just leave right now. And I wrote down like word because literally,
how do you get more transparent?
Yeah.
Let's be real. Brenda is showing up authentically, unapologetically. And she's literally saying, this is who I am.
Yeah. And she's not like chasing Nate. Like they're just like mutually.
But I think that's what he likes.
Yeah. And I think that he's used to that. So he feels like he has the right to be pissed at her about this, that, and the other. And then she's needing to constantly remind him, like, I actually don't give a fuck what you think. I'm just me.
I just had a realization. So during my coaching, I'm an intimacy coach, like we know. I talk a lot about this stuff, and I just realized a lot of times what I see if I'm working with couples together, we get through like questions and figuring out past and figuring out what's working now, discrepancies, all the things. I find it so common that what people fall in love with is what drives them apart. So let me explain that. Nate is falling in love with the fact that Brenda is unapologetic, authentically herself, doesn't give a fuck. And that's what he likes. And that's eventually, if I'm right, I think that this is what happens. It is eventually what causes them to disintegrate too.
Yeah.
And let me be clear, I'm not saying that being unapologetic and authentic is a bad thing at all. I think Brenda did everything right. But it's just interesting now seeing it from a coaching perspective that seems to be a common theme.
Yeah. I can see that for sure. That's really interesting to think about. So yeah,
we find out that Brenda did know that Nate was invited to the Chenoweth's house without her and is not upset and has the book ready and autographed for Nate. I thought this scene was interesting. Brenda is just over people reading this book and people thinking that they know her. And I think that
she's been through this before, clearly, with her parents. They've obviously done this to her before, and she's kind of expecting Nate to just leave her after this because that's what she's used to. So we also find out here a little bit more detail about the background. She had this book written about her after it was identified that she had such a high IQ when she was a child. And this is the book that Margaret referenced earlier in the episode that left us on a little bit of a cliffhanger when she was like, oh, she didn't tell you about that either.
Was it written by her?
Yeah, I think later on we find out more about the details of that, but I think it was written by like Brenda's shrink or something. Brenda, this was a good line from her. She's kind of defending herself to Nate and explaining because Nate's coming at her pissed off and she's like, yeah, well, you feel uncomfortable. That's what I've dealt with my whole life. And she's explaining about this book and how they analyzed her like a lab rat. And she goes, it is a fucking law of physics that the very act of observation changes that which is being observed. So she's saying...
For us over here, can you explain that?
So she's saying they were watching me and I knew they were watching me. So I fucked with them.
Oh.
Because it's like, I might be wrong, but I feel like there's a thing called the Hawthorne effect. And I feel like we learned this in high school. But if I remember what this is correctly, it's like basically kind of what she's saying. If somebody knows they're being watched, they're going to behave differently. You cannot,
or not. If it,
yeah. So you cannot, it's really hard to conduct an ethical study on human behavior because people have to agree to being a part of a study. But then if they agree to that, then they know they're being watched. So that's kind of like a part or connected to what she's saying, I think. But she's basically just saying,
he outsmarted them.
but it's like, she's still so resentful because they kind of like took advantage of her, exploited her. I think she feels very exploited.
Against her own will.
Yeah, and she's saying they all thought that I was this big spectacle, but they were too stupid to realize that the fucking law of physics says that the very act of observation changes that which is being observed. So the fact that they were watching her, they should have known that she was fucking with them, but they were too fixated on their own
What was she fucking
gains.
with?
So she did a bunch of shit that we will find out, but we start to learn more about her trauma from this experience. And she felt like a lab rat. And Nate asks Brenda if she burned down the house. And she laughs and she's like, "You think I burned down the house? That is so weird." And he kind of freaks out and is like, "Well, what the fuck am I supposed to think? You do this, you do that." And she kind of confesses to him that she's been holding back because she doesn't want to open up to him if she's just another step along his way. And she asks him, "Should I trust you?" And he says yes. And they hug. And it was a really sweet moment. And then we see the book cover,
But
Charlotte, Light and Dark. I think that he knew what she was saying because she was basically saying, like, am I just like another one? Because at this point, we connected the dots that Nate has like just basically been sleeping around his whole adult life. He's never really had a serious relationship to speak of. And she wants to know, am I just another one of like your fuck buddies, or is this thing I'm feeling with you?
Okay.
Are you feeling it too? And I think that I think Nate has enough integrity that, or I choose to believe, I guess, that in this moment, if he would have felt like there was no future with Brenda, that he could have just walked away right there.
He would have.
And he had every opportunity to, and he could have even just been like,
he could have walked out of dinner too, I suppose.
Yeah. But he clearly like does care for her and wants to believe that there's a future for them.
Yeah.
I think. So
I also wanted to point out too, this is kind of where I realized that Brenda did not burn down the house. I don't think she did.
Yeah, I don't really think so either.
And I think you said that we don't ever find out.
That's kind of what I think, but I don't remember for sure.
Okay. And then I want to point out too that this whole combo with Brenda is like a huge defense mechanism for her. She's putting up all of these guards. It is clear and plain. You don't have to be a therapist to figure that out. Like she's definitely,
she has walls.
Yes. She doesn't want to feel the hurt and the pain that she's felt with previous guys, which I think we find out later with Billy, that conversation. And hearing her say, "Oh, yes, I wrote the hug too."
Yeah, their hug was really, really sweet. It was just a quick, like, they hugged after she asks, "Should I trust you?" And he says yes, but it was a very, like, intimate, sweet moment. You could feel it for sure.
Why don't people do that often anymore?
I don't know. It really
my husband always
so
tries
necessary.
to, like, grab my boob, and I'm just supposed to be in the mood. And it's like, fucking hug me. Give me a kiss.
Yeah, hugs are so powerful. They really are. They're like the most powerful thing.
Oh, I'm sorry. Grab my boob.
Yeah,
just kidding. I mean, not really. They're really bad, but that's fine.
So then we're back with Claire and Ruth and Hannah and Jenny. And
oh, yes.
They're playing Scrabble, and Claire spells the word hell. And then Hannah goes, hello. And then Ruth spells the word deft. And Hannah and her daughter don't know the word deft, so Ruth explains what the word deft means, and she uses it in a sentence. And she was like, "Oh, he
Claire does
deftly applying his skills." And Claire was like, "Or deft, where is thy sting?" And I had no idea what that meant at all, so I looked it up. And apparently, "Oh, death, where is thy sting?" is a line from the Bible, 1 Corinthians 15:55, and the full verse reads, "O death, where is thy sting? O grave, where is thy victory? The sting of death is sin, and the strength of sin is the law. But thanks be to God, which giveth us the victory through our Lord Jesus Christ. So the explanation for that is that the verse is a celebration of the resurrection of Jesus Christ and his victory over death and sin. And it is a central part of Christian faith and provides hope and faith. So I thought I just kind of got the chills actually explaining that because, again, I'm not religious at all, neither is Courtney, but we are very spiritual. And even just them even though this is like a Catholic Christian thing that they put in here, the fact that Claire and Ruth are in this moment where Ruth is desperately trying to bond with Claire, they're not really getting along. And then Ruth spells the word deft, and then Claire's connects to the word deft this Bible verse, or deft where is thy sting, and then her and Ruth kind of like chuckle at that together, and that whole meaning of that Bible verse is hope and faith is really interesting.
Yeah, and that was how they
it was
connected.
Yeah, they both were like connecting over. It was like they were having hope and faith in each other, even though they were in a situation where they were realizing like they weren't gonna get out of it what they intend or what Ruth intended to, basically. I thought it was a super interesting little nugget and very, again, clever fucking writing.
Before we move on, I didn't know what deft meant. So I did Google that motherfucker. And so I watched this 2 days ago, or when did I send it to you?
Yeah, I don't know.
Not yesterday, but the day before. So yesterday, this word popped up in an email that I got.
Really? Yeah. Isn't it weird how whenever that happens to me, I wonder, I'm like, is this a sign or am I just only recognizing this because I
Googled it
thought
before.
of it? And otherwise I would have not even recognized it. That happens so much.
I should go back through my emails and just type the word deft in and see what comes up. Because if that's the only one, I will shit my fucking pants.
That's a good point. Actually, you should do that. I'm curious.
Ruth and her cousin talking about Ed and Nathaniel. Ed is Hannah's husband who's still alive, but she's trying to relate. She's trying to relate to Ruth. And I didn't see this as like I'm trying to be, we're both the same. You get over it. Yada, yada, yada. I didn't see it as that. I saw it as Hannah trying her fucking hardest to at least feel what Ruth is feeling. And the closest thing that she could think of was her husband leaving her.
That's really interesting that you thought that.
And now I'm reading your notes.
I got so annoyed at her here. I was like, that is so insulting. I don't know. I felt like it was really, yeah.
As Ruth, you're probably insulted.
Yeah, I do. I mean, I do think that Hannah and Jenny they're just, I think they're idiots.
Mm-hmm.
I think they just
feel any malice towards them at all.
Yeah, it wasn't, yeah, you're right. It wasn't intentional, but it was ignorant and it was stupid and it was insensitive, even though they didn't realize it was insensitive.
But it doesn't something that's insensitive have to have intent?
No.
Okay.
I feel like that's like saying you can say something racist and it's not racist if you didn't mean for it to be racist. Like, you don't get to decide what impact your words have on someone else. Or like
the weight that they hold.
Yeah. But I mean, I still do, like, I'll give it to them that I don't think they were like trying to be mean at all, but that still doesn't excuse you from
the idiocracy.
Yeah, from being like ignorant to the reality of their situation. But basically, and honestly, like, who would do that in real life? I would never dream of equating my husband leaving me to somebody else's husband dying in a car accident.
I don't know. I can see, I feel like I've been in that situation.
Especially when it's like so fresh, like he just died. And while Ruth goes on, this is kind of proves my point, or not proves my point, but it just illustrates more of what Ruth is feeling. But
this actually, what you're just about to say chilled me. My spine was just goosebumping over it because it was so.
Just now, or when you watched it?
When I was watching it.
Yeah.
What you're about to talk about.
So they're having this kind of interaction where Hannah's like, oh yeah, this was the same as Nathaniel, or I was so tore up. And Ruth was like, she stands up for herself here. And she was like, but Ed didn't die. He's still alive. You can still see him. When Jenny gets married, you'll both be there. When she has children, they'll be able to know him. He's not gone forever. And Claire looks kind of compassionately at her mom and is realizing how much pain she's in while saying this, and how also out of character it is for her to say this because Ruth is a people pleaser, kind of. And I think this was the moment where Ruth decided kind of like, F these people. These are not our people, essentially. And then Jenny butts in, sensing the tension, and suggests that they go to spin class together in the morning. And Claire says, no offense, but I'd rather drive a rusty railroad spike through my skull. Which was
Probably me too.
same and also
But the spin
hilarious.
teacher was so cute, remember?
Yeah, Hannah and Jenny were like giggling over their spin teacher. But I thought it was so cute too how when Claire said that Ruth could not contain her giggles, she liked it. She was like,
It was the sweetest, most genuine, like...
yeah. It was so cute and also such very good acting from Frances Conroy in that moment too. It was very, very uplifting.
Yeah.
Just that quick little giggle from Ruth.
Okay, so then we're talking about David and the porn star, the spirit of the porn star talking to David, and they're arguing about their sins because David's trying to say that her sins were worse.
Well, he was working on her, and she's naked, and she has her big fake boobs, and she's like, "You really don't like them? Like you're not?
Yes.
They don't do anything for you?" And
Yep.
he was like, "Well, I can appreciate that they're beautiful in their own artificial way." Or something, which I thought was like kind of nice, but also a dig. I mean, he admitted they were beautiful.
That's like saying you hit nice for a girl.
But they are artificial.
I know. It was a dig.
But I think
they are a girl.
He didn't even have to say, though, anything complimentary. Like, he didn't need
But
to
he also didn't need to say the last part.
Yeah. He's showing his, like, I don't know if bias is the right word, but kind of like he doesn't fully respect her because of her status, profession. But in this moment, I think he starts to come to realize how he has a lot more in common with Viveca than he realizes.
Yeah, well, we all do. And one of the biggest points I put out here was they're literally arguing about their sins. And it's like, get the fuck over it. Who the fuck cares?
Their sins being David being gay and her being
a porn star.
Yeah.
There's nothing wrong with either of those quote unquote sins. And B, the sin is a sin. Like it's an X. It's not like X squared or I'm getting scientific mathematically again. And none of it's going to make sense. But essentially what I'm trying to tell you is that the sin doesn't matter. It doesn't fucking matter, and your sin is no worse or greater than mine.
Yeah, David kind of is on a high horse, I think, a little bit, and he starts to come down with interacting with these characters like Paco and Viveca.
Yep.
But we see David talking to Viveca's ghost, and we see him kind of start to reconcile his idea of being godly with the perspective that Viveca's lifestyle provides. And I think that he's kind of comparing himself to her in this scene.
Yep.
Another character who is unapologetically themselves, kind of like Paco, despite living what some would consider.
I think he hates. He doesn't hate, he envies.
He envies that they can be so themselves. Much. Yeah. And they're both
that he envies it.
Yes. But it's good for him.
Yes.
Because it's pulling him out of his hole a little bit, little by little. But people would consider being a porn star or being a gang member just as taboo as being gay in this situation in David's mind. And he's looking at these people that are coming through, and he's simultaneously advocating for these dead people's dignity, like he did with Viveca at the beginning with Nate. But he's also kind of struggling with his own inner turmoil with like having his own judgments about them, but also realizing how much he has in common with them or how much that he could learn from them. And he is using them to kind of help him out of this hole that he's in of not being able to like come to terms with his own identity.
He's trying to recreate the narrative of his life with the help of the souls from other people, but he doesn't understand at this moment in time that that's actually what's happening.
Yeah. He's slowly starting to realize that he is also deserving of dignity and shouldn't allow himself to be ostracized for being gay.
Oh, Ruth wakes up Claire early so they can dip out of the house before spin class. They run to the car together and we see them bonding in their own way. It was actually very sweet.
It was cute. It was like they didn't bond on this little trip like Ruth had planned, but they did end up bonding. a little in their own way.
Which is always how it works. It's like you can't plan.
Yeah, you can't force things like that.
Then we're at breakfast, and this is one of my favorites.
At a restaurant.
A public restaurant, a nice one,
Mm-hmm.
too. And Nate looks at Brenda and says, "Thanks for buying me breakfast." And Brenda says, "Thanks for finding my G-spot this morning." And Nate says, "Anytime." And I just LOL'd because then Brenda gives Nate a key to her apartment.
Mm-hmm. Cute little fun, silly, steamy scene. Then we have a few chaotic moments coming up here. So we see that David and Keith are having breakfast at the same restaurant that Brenda and Nate are at. And they're discussing David's deaconship. And David explains that he sees it as a chance to make a difference and make the world a little more tolerant. And Keith says, "Frankly, I resent the notion that I need to be tolerated," which I thought was really powerful.
Agreed. And David's full of shit because that was not his plan.
Yeah, that's a good call because that's so true. We have already seen that.
David's manipulating the situation right now to make Keith happy, and that was not.
He's
going
trying
on.
to kind of have his cake and eat it too in a
Yep.
way, and it's not really working out for him. And he also makes a joke here. David does. This was an interesting throwback thing that I didn't know about, but maybe someone out there might think this is interesting. He makes a joke here comparing him and Keith to George Will, David, and Cokie Roberts, Keith, on PMS. So apparently, George Will and Cokie Roberts are two political commentators, George being conservative and Cokie being centrist. So David is saying that he feels like they have the same dynamics as these two political commentators, and the conversation starts to get heated. But then Brenda and Nate see them and approach them at the restaurant.
Yeah. And Nate introduces Brenda as his girlfriend, and Brenda proudly says, "I prefer the term fuck puppet." And
That was a little shocking of a line, like in that situation.
do you know what that reminded me of?
What?
I have said something similar when Rob introduced me to somebody when we were just like dating in
Yeah.
the beginning. And it was almost like out of character for me. I don't know where the words came from. It was like word vomit. And it was somebody important, like a close, I think it was his aunt.
Oh, God. What term did you use to describe yourself?
Fuck buddy.
I can totally hear you saying that.
But at the time, it wasn't authentic at the time. Like I was so nervous.
It just like came out.
Yes.
Yeah.
Like, no, I would definitely authentically say something like that. But at the time, this was 10 years ago.
Yeah.
So I don't know. I think I was just nervous and like things just started boiling out of my mouth. It was awkward.
That happens to me a lot. I don't say things like that, but sometimes I just start talking and I don't know what words are coming out and I have no control over it and I just have to hope for the best.
And then it happens.
Yes. So that was hilarious. Brenda says the fuck puppet line, and then Nate asks David and Keith what they're doing there. And David says that they just worked out. And Nate was like, "Oh, so you guys work out together?" And David grabs Keith's hand like this and is like, "Yeah, we do." And he's essentially having just come out to his brother here. And Nate's all flustered. And he's like,
Peep Brenda's face and this too.
she was just like, I think she knew from the second that they laid eyes on
Yes, she
them.
did.
She was just like, oh, and was just slowly waiting for Nate to put the pieces together. And Nate's just like, oh, that's great. Okay. You guys, you have a great day. Okay. Like, see you later. Oh, that's great. Like, he's just being super weird. And then it shows him walking away with Brenda. And he's like, oh my God, I think David's gay.
I know.
Yeah. Same. That was hilarious.
To say something like, yeah, and didn't you see the...
I think David's lucky. Yeah. Did you get a look at that guy? Because Keith is a pretty sexy hunk.
Okay, so then we're at the moment where Ruth then comes clean about her affair to Claire. And so then that's when I got the realization of the name of this episode called The Open Book. Really living up to its name with all the terms.
I wanted to interject here because when I read your note, I was hoping I would remember I would say this, but there are so many references to the term open book in this scene. So Ruth coming clean, Brenda actually says at one point, if it wasn't in this episode, it was in the last episode, I'm an open book. We learn about the book written about Brenda and it opens in this episode. We literally see Nate reading the book about Brenda. So the book is open. There's so
David
many
comes
things.
out.
Yes.
Ruth comes clean about
Claire.
Claire comes clean about the toes.
Yeah, there's so much. So that's like really, really permeates throughout the whole episode. There's so many open books happening, even like literal physical open books with Brenda.
Literally.
Mm-hmm.
That was when I was like, whoa, something.
Yeah. So Ruth is telling Claire that she had an affair, and Claire is just stunned. She's like, why are you telling me this? And Ruth says, because it's the truth, and whatever relationship we have, I want it to be honest, even if you hate me. And Claire was like, Mom, I don't hate you. I remember.
Ruth thought that Claire could hate her.
I know, but I don't think she really thought that, but it's just like how she felt.
Yeah.
Because like that's how Claire was acting, you know, and that I've definitely, oh my gosh, I have totally acted like that toward my mom. Anyway, yeah, I can identify with both of them, honestly. And she goes, I don't hate you. I remember going to the movies, but I'm 17 now and I have my own life and have to figure some things out on my own. And that's like normal. And I know stealing a foot is weird, but hello, living in a house where a foot is available to be stolen is weird, which is super funny and so true. I wanted to ask you about Ruth in this scene. Ruth is crying and walks away. It was kind of a weird moment to me. Claire looks worried about her mom, and Ruth seems like she's happy that Claire was like, I love you, and I remember going to the movies with you. But she's also crying. It's almost like she's grieving that her daughter's growing up, maybe.
Yeah. Okay. Gross. Gross is in like, I can't do that right now.
Yeah. Yeah. Like you don't want to put yourself thinking about that.
No, but I can totally see how you would think that too.
Yeah. Yeah. It was just an interesting, because it was like they had a good interaction, but Ruth is still crying. But I think that's what it was. She was just kind of grieving.
Like happy.
She was happy that Claire was like, okay. But she's sad because she's realizing she needs to let her kind of go.
And I wonder, we don't know this because we started the show when Claire was like 16 or 17, but I wonder if she has a lot of regret.
Yeah, like about maybe not spending more time with her or like doing more because she was the
baby, and they're older parents with Claire. They have a lot of things. They're running their business. Oh my God, yes.
Yeah, it's kind of sad.
There's some in there.
Yeah, for sure. It's interesting.
And yes, happiness.
Yeah, because she's realizing Claire's not.
Isn't that funny how you can have all of those emotions at one time?
Yeah, and that was a fun scene to unpack too, because it does make sense now that we've kind of done that and talked through it. But when I first watched it, I was just like, what's going on in her head right now? But that makes sense. So then David and Keith get into a fight.
Before she goes into hers, all I had to say about this.
Yeah, I was curious because you didn't write. You just wrote, if you know, you know.
I'll get to that part after, but because I want you to go through yours.
Okay.
So I'll say my first word and my last word of my entire notes of this scene.
Okay.
The first word was just yikes.
Okay. So David and Keith get into a fight. We're back to them leaving the restaurant right after David came out to Nate and Brenda. And they're both hyped up. They're laughing about it. They're laughing about this stupid look on Nate's face when David came out to him. But then when Keith brings up the party that David said that he would go to with him that weekend, David says he doesn't think he can go anymore because he doesn't want to miss church because of the deacon situation. And Keith is like, okay, well, we'll come back on Saturday night and I'll go to church with you. And David was like, when he said, we'll come back Saturday night, he's like, that'll work. And then he's like, then I'll come to church with you. And he's like, I don't think that's a good idea. And then Keith breaks out and he goes, David, you're ashamed of it, man. I'm not having any of that. Not anymore. And David is like confused. And he's like, I just came out to my brother. Like, that was a huge step for me. And Keith was just like, yeah, that's one step forward and like giant steps back right into the arms of the enemy. And David is like, so now I'm a Nazi collaborator. You know, a lot of African Americans might say the same thing about you being a member of the LAPD, which was kind of an interesting point, but he's also deflecting. And Keith calls David a fucking coward and speeds away, leaves him there. I felt really bad for David here, but I also sympathize with Keith. I feel mostly bad for David just because he did have such a huge monumental moment by coming out to his brother, and then he just kind of gets it thrown in his face.
Squash.
And yeah, he's being kind of shady with like this whole deal. Like he needs more time, and he's really conflicted right now, and I do understand how Keith is having a hard time with that. But I feel like David deserved more credit for coming out to his brother.
Yeah, he did. And I think in time Keith will come around for that. And I also wrote, if you know, you know. It is so interesting to see it's like I'm trying to think of like volcanic. What is the word
With
I'm
Keith.
thinking of? Yes.
Explosive.
Explosive.
Yeah.
He held all of his shit in together for so long, and then it was like the straw that broke the camel's back, and he just was done. And we've all our boiling points. We all have had those boiling points, and Keith has had so many gold stars and good job, Keith. You're so good. And now he gets to be a little bit volatile for a minute. And David is sitting there confused, which blows my mind because I've been in both of their sides of the one Keith and David. So I'm just thinking, if you know what it's like to do everything that you possibly could think of to do to make things right with your partner, thinking in Keith's perspective, support. Keith is doing things in such a great way by being, he's open within his community and his family.
Like doing everything he can, but he's not being met with the same amount of.
Yep. I equated that to everyday life, married to a straight cis white male.
Yeah. Yeah. That's a good point. I mean, that is the dynamic with a lot of hetero relationships, honestly.
And so then I was thinking back to it as in, remember when, maybe not last episode, but the episode before, when Nathaniel Sr. was in David's mind and said, so which one of you's the wife? In this scenario, I say Keith, because he's experiencing all of the gross feelings
of being
the mentally. Yes. Everything that he's saying. And it's like, oh my God.
Yeah.
I just wanted to hug.
Really hard. Their dynamic is so difficult because
I think their love is so real.
Yeah.
In almost every possible way to.
And it's so hard because like all that about Keith is so true, but at the same time, like David, I don't know, you can't
rush somebody's
outing. So it's just really stressful. But
Keith felt like he's been I think their timelines are off. Right. So Keith's like, you've done these things. It's time to now do oh my God, I do the same thing to Rob. I literally do that. I'm like kind of the pusher. You can do this. Come on.
There's a lot of nuance to every like specific situation though.
Yeah.
So sometimes I think in some situations it might be warranted to do that. And maybe some would even argue that it's warranted for Keith to be doing that to David right now, but it's so much more of a tricky line to walk on when it's someone's sexual orientation, and like also connected to that, a lot of David just general like life and reputation, as sad as that is. Yeah. So it affects him, and he should have autonomy over what he shares with people. But unfortunately, Keith also has the autonomy to be able to decide. I mean, not unfortunately, but unfortunately for David, like he needs to recognize that Keith has his own autonomy, and Keith can decide for himself what he's willing to deal with. And he's kind of realizing here
what his boiling point,
like what he's willing to tolerate. So then we meet Billy.
And so all I put was, hi, Billy, because he's like in his towel at Brenda's house.
So Nate and Brenda come home to Brenda's house after breakfast, and Billy walks in. He's there unexpectedly. He's wearing just a towel around his waist. And Brenda's she's pissed because she's like, you're supposed to call me before you come over. And then he's like, I did. And she plays the answering machine, and he left a message saying that he needed to come over and take a shower because his was broken or something. But Nate is confused. Billy introduces himself to Nate and is acting like a weirdo. There's tension. You can tell that Nate is feeling like threatened by Billy. And Billy's like slapping himself and he's like, oh, she's my sister, my mother, my sister, my mother. But apparently that is a reference to a scene in Chinatown, which is a movie from 1974. I didn't know that either, but I found that out when I was researching. But then Billy says to Nate,
wow, you've made it pretty far. So why haven't I heard of you? Which bothered me in several ways.
yeah.
One of them being like, Billy, are you like her guardsman?
Yeah.
Are you the fucking
It's weird that
king's guard? Or whatever? The queen's guard? Like, what do you mean? Why haven't I heard of you? Clearly, there's not a lot of men that Brenda has brought in thus far. What prompted Billy to be like, wow, you made it
he
pretty
was like,
far?
have you met the parents yet?
Oh, yes.
He's like, yeah, last night. And then he's
Yeah.
like, oh, wow, you made it pretty far. So why haven't I heard of you? And Nate was like, no idea. Then when Billy turns around, we see the tattoo
Of Isabel
that says Isabel.
on his
And
bootay.
now we can connect the dots that they have matching tattoos from the children's book, Nathaniel and Isabel. Then we're at Viveca's funeral, and Rico reveals to Nate, because Nate's like, how did you get her boobs to stick together? Because they looked good. And Rico goes, I stuck a can of cat food under each one. And he's like, my sister-in-law did a cat food commercial or something, because later on, she will become a little bit bigger of a character. It's just sister-in-law. Yeah. But she's like a commercial actress, basically. And Viveca's mourners are proceeding to give their eulogies for her, and their eulogies are detailing Viveca's talents as an adult film actress. And Ruth stumbles upon the scene and is mortified, which was funny.
Literally mortified. Like,
Mhm.
we'll talk with some of the pieces from the funeral. I can honestly say I've never had a better blowjob in my life. And then Sandra Oh from Grey's Anatomy and The Princess Diaries actually plays one of the porn stars at the funeral. And she was the one that went down on Viveca for the first time. And she made Viveca made her feel so special or something
Yeah.
like that.
So is that the actress's name, Sandra Oh?
Sandra Oh.
Okay, I did not put. I'm glad that you caught that because I've never watched Grey's Anatomy, but I know of it and I know the characters. I know the character that she plays.
As soon as I saw her, I'm like, what the fuck is she from? I've actually never seen Grey's Anatomy either. I remembered her from Princess Diaries, but then Grey's Anatomy popped up and I was trying to the principal.
I can't even think of. Yeah, that's because after I read your note, I was like, oh my gosh, that is that woman. But that was so interesting. She plays like a really dopey porn star actress, just talking about how
With blonde hair.
Viveca was like the best.
It's just clearly her natural hair color.
She's acting super still. We see Claire talking to her counselor, Gary, and she's explaining the sleepover that her and her mom had with Hannah and Jenny. And she's saying, my mom's just so fucking sad and I wish I could help her. And Gary goes, so help her. But in this scene, I really, again, identified with Claire. I felt for her here. And like, it's not Ruth's fault, but at the same time, Claire is still a child and shouldn't have to be feeling this way. But I can really identify with feeling like I felt like that before with my mom. I can just tell or could tell that she was sad, but you feel like you should do something, but you don't really know and you're a kid. But that's just not really a fair position for a child to be put into. And when you're 16, you are still a child. And so I felt for her feeling the fact that she felt that way. She shouldn't be having to feel that way. She shouldn't be carrying that with her. She's just still a kid herself.
Yeah, what the fuck? I never really I never felt that about my mom.
Yeah.
But hearing you say that, I know that you have.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's like bringing memories to the front of my brain of, that's not fair.
And when you are in that position as like a teenager, you don't realize that that's not fair.
No,
so you
it
take
seems
on the responsibility and the like weight of that. And that's why it's so bad. So yeah. But then we see David walking in on one of the eulogies for Viveca, and the man is saying, I loved her, and I know God loved her too, and I knew he knew just what he was doing and how much joy she would bring to the world. And I think that this resonated with David, and it's like he's being told it's okay and God loves him no matter what. And then we see David being pronounced the deacon at his church, and he has a moment where he sees everyone in the crowd naked, and Viveca's ghost is blowing him a kiss. And it's as if she's giving him her blessing and another reminder that to be who he is. At least that's kind of what I got out of that scene.
Agreed. And Or Keith is not there.
And yeah, Keith's not there, unfortunately, after their blowout. Then we see David regressing a little bit after this scene. Nate approaches him and like congratulates him, and he asks where Keith is. And
So
David,
sweet, which was very
that was
sweet.
very nice of Nate. Yeah. And David's like, he's just a friend, Nate, and walks away. So we see him regressing, and we see Nate also start to realize kind of what David's going through with his conflict in being a part of
And
this
how hard
church
it has to be.
community.
Yep.
Yeah. There's like a close up on Nate's face, like looking at David walk away, like
His empathicness happening.
yeah. And then Claire asks Ruth at the church after they witnessed David being sworn in as a deacon or whatever, if she wants to watch movies with her the next night. And Ruth is overjoyed. And Claire goes, yeah, if you start crying, this whole thing is off. And then Ruth like giggles and they kind of laugh together. That was so sweet. So we're seeing them. They're
connecting.
They're coming out on the other side stronger here. And then Nate and Brenda have a discussion about whether they believe in God. And Brenda says she does not. And Nate says he does. But he's like, not like a bearded white man in a cloud, but something. And Brenda says, I think it's just all totally random. We live, we die. Ultimately, nothing means anything.
And then Nate says, how can you live like that? And I had a personal calling to this part of the episode because I remember when I first decided that God wasn't real, I remember having this conversation with somebody and they said the same thing to me. Like, how can you live like that? And it is scary. It is scary to live that life of, well, if you just die at the end of it. My husband's I think here's where Nate is, and then like here's where my husband is, and then I'm like right here, right? So I do believe in things. I believe in higher powers, and I believe in spirituality and things happening in the universe and all of this stuff. I just don't want to be led by fear. So that is like where my foundation came from switching my beliefs and deciding something else for myself. But I do remember hearing, how can you live like that? And it is fucking scary. Like I actually think about that for Rob too, how depressing it is for him to think, how can you live like that? And like actually genuinely think that there is nothing else. Where I do think that there is something else. I don't know what it is. I don't think it.
I do too. Yeah, I don't know how it works, but I know there's something going on.
Yes. It's not your typical, it's not orthodox.
Yeah, it's not like, I 100% agree with you about the fear thing. I hate organized religion. I hate it.
Yeah, it's fucked up.
But I think, yeah, there's something. But I agree with you about this part with Brenda. And I think this reminded me too when Nate said, how can you live like that? And then Brenda responds, I don't know. Sometimes I wake up so fucking empty. I wish I'd never been born, but what choice do I have? And
relatable.
Yes, she's once again showing her extreme intelligence. And it's another example of her embodying that Virginia Woolf quote that we compared her to in episode 2.
Yes.
And I think there really is some truth behind, and I'm not trying to say I'm like this or Courtney's like this, but I think we can understand it in a way. And I think that Brenda's character embodies this, that when you are a certain level of enlightened or have come to certain realizations or have a certain level of intelligence or however you want to describe it, it's so depressing because then you're forced to confront the reality of the logic that is in front of you and surrounds you. And when you put 2 and 2 together, it's like, yeah, no, actually, this whole fucking church bullshit is just
bullshit.
A way to control people,
control and cushion the blow.
Yeah, and a lie that adults tell themselves to make themselves feel better about. I don't know. That's kind of how, I'm not trying to be like mean to anybody or insult anybody's religious beliefs. I don't want anyone to feel alienated if you do believe, but I think that Brenda's character just really embodies kind of how we look at things. It's just a very realistic, and it is very sad and depressing when you take that information in front of you and put it together and come to the realization that like it's not really realistic to find solace in imaginary thing like that. Like you kind of have to, I don't know, I view it as you kind of have to like go inside a little bit more in order to get that.
It's a topic worth discussing that has no answers.
Yeah, it's
And that's
ultimately and ultimately every living being should go about their life and think the things that they want to think in a way that will make them the most happy. And if organized religion makes you happy or makes somebody happy, then I support that for them.
Yes.
It doesn't work for me.
I tell the girls the same thing. Like my kids, like if they ever say they want to go to church, I will go. I'm not going to like change my beliefs or anything, but I will take them. I will make sure that they are getting whatever information. I want them to have all of the information.
Yeah, and to be their own people. And that's what everybody should be able to do. This is just, I'm just saying what I believe, and I know what like you think too. But anyway, fun fact about this episode that we didn't talk about yet. This episode was directed by Kathy Bates, which Kathy actually ends up becoming a character later on in the series, Bettina, which we'll talk about her when we get to those episodes.
Soon-ish.
Too far later. Yeah. She's really good, but I guess she did direct a lot of these episodes, which is just kind of a fun little piece of trivia. And there were also a lot of Gilmore Girls connections. Did you know that Nate, so Peter Krause, dated the Lorelai Gilmore for a long time? They like just broke up in like 2019.
That was a long time ago.
I know, but like they dated back in, they dated for like 10 years or I don't know, a long time. I don't know. Don't quote me on that. But so in this episode, there was a scene where like they were watching Gilmore Girls when Claire and Ruth went over to Hannah and Jenny's house. And there were, also Hannah, the actress who played Hannah in this episode, played a character in Gilmore Girls.
I didn't watch Gilmore Girls.
Neither did I.
I
never watched Lorelai and Rory. I know who they are. I don't know really anything else, and that's not.
There was a guy that Lorelai dated that I thought was hot.
Okay. Yeah. So that's our episode. That's pretty much it. We hope you liked it. Thank you for watching. Oh yeah, you're right. We didn't do that yet. Okay. So Father Jack. Meet, date, cremate.
Mate, date, cremate. Mate, date, cremate. Father Jack. I also think we should throw in one of the channel.
Ooh, which one? Margaret or Bernard?
Margaret.
Okay. And Gary, the counselor.
Oh, what?
Father Jack, Gary, or Margaret?
Mate, date, cremate. Mate is Mary, right?
Okay.
Mate is fuck.
Yeah.
Okay. I'm gonna mate Margaret. I don't know why. I just feel like she's intuitive. And she's a female, so she knows my body. And I'm queer, so that's fine. I'm going to date, which is Mary, Father Jack.
Okay.
And I'll just kill the counselor. I don't know. I don't want to kill him.
Yeah.
I don't want to cremate him.
Interesting. Okay.
But let me like vouch for my mate.
Okay.
Or date.
Okay.
Father Jack, I would date him long term because I feel like he put a lot of effort into seeing the feelings and validating things and really wanted to make.
He's very thoughtful and he's an ally.
Yeah. And that's what you want in a partner, I think.
Yeah.
An ally.
Yeah. I like that for sure. Oof. I think I would. Ooh, this is really hard. Okay. So you said you would date Father Jack, mate Margaret.
I would kill the counselor. Cremate the counselor.
I would. This is silly. Okay. I would mate Margaret too. I would date Gary. I don't want to cremate Father Jack. I actually love Father Jack, but
he's cremated.
I'm cremating Father Jack.
He's cremation.
Yeah. I think Gary, I don't know. This is based in my opinion thus far. It may change as the show goes on, but I like him so far.
I kind of want Claire to fuck him. Does she fuck him?
No, but there's a scene coming up. I can cut this part out since it's at the end if we end up not wanting to include it. But there's a part. Well, maybe I shouldn't even say anything and just let it happen.
Don't tell me.
I'm excited. I think it's coming up in one of the next couple episodes that it stands out to me as being a very odd line from him that I'm excited to unpack with you. But yeah, I would date him.
Who's the MVP?
This episode, I kind of have to give it to Brenda, I think, because we learned a lot about her and she's got a lot more going on and a lot more like trauma, I think, than we would have ever realized up until this point, up until these revelations. And I think she handled it uniquely, but held her own. And so I liked I don't know. Or I could also vouch for Father Jack, honestly.
Damn it, he didn't pick any of them.
Who would you pick?
Honestly, there was so much chaos in this fucking show, this episode. So much turmoil, so many yuckies. I was thinking Rico because of the cat food.
Well, yeah, he came through with
He
the,
did. And I
with the cat food.
the only one that like didn't fucking act weird.
Yeah, which he needs.
He came and
he needs
conquered.
this point.
That was it.
Yeah, he didn't have any chaos. He didn't bring any of the chaos this time.
No, he shut it down.
All right, well,
Don't forget to like and subscribe.
and share with other friends who like 6 Feet Under.
Yes, because we love our 10 followers.
We seriously do. Oh, by the way, if you're watching this, thank you to our friend on Instagram who reached out and said
Sent
that
us $1 million.
I would recommended the book. I did order it. It's at home on my desk. Thank you for reaching out and letting us know that you like our podcast, and we
Love you. Bye.
I'm so tired this time. I'm sorry.